So we've all seen it happen in real time. The first Asian team have made it to the playoffs of the Valve-sponsored majors. Absolutely incredible, and an outstanding achievement for a roster I think we've all secretly been rooting for pretty much the entire year. I'm going to take a quick look at what exactly I believe separates this Mongolz roster from the Asian teams of the past. Honestly, the Asian teams of today, for a lot of this still applies to. I'm also going to see what makes this team tick, what philosophies have gotten this far, and who really deserves all the credit for this masterclass. Now, Asian teams in the past were interesting. They were always mechanically quite skilled, stacked with players who, if you put them in like a 1v1 aim match, probably could match or outduel a lot of the European players we loved, but they never quite had the holistic understanding of the game locked down to a T. Now, we did have some exciting Counter-Strike played by these rosters, some unique styles and approaches. I remember the Tai Lu teams who could vary incredibly heavily from these very aggressive setups to, I remember one event surprising everyone by playing ultra passive, super deep, far back setups. One of the ones that comes to mind was they were playing an Inferno A-side defense with a pit, graveyard, and then deep in sight, I believe, third man, just inviting teams onto them. And once they'd laid out their execute through their flashes, all of a sudden, bang, 3 heads pop up, guns start firing, and they gave themselves a chance by playing these kinds of games. One key difference for the Mongols has been the vision of Blitz and Mara, the coach in IGL, who have formed the way this team is not only just built, but the philosophies they use when they actually play. They know exactly how they want to approach rounds, how they want to use pieces. They want to go for these early confrontations, these big early opening brawls. They also want to have very committed mid to late rounds with groups of players exploding into areas. They know which players they want to use where and when to really get the most out of them. This mid to late round leadership really is emblematic of what's made Blitz so successful. Sure, he's a good fragger. We'll get to that later. But the fact that he's able to get everyone to buy into these ideas, these very hard committals, these plays for bomb sites, these rotations, has been key. And one of the things that I think is really important right now in the game is not necessarily just that leaders have the best tactical idea, but this has always been true. But I think it's especially true right now. It's just that they have the leadership to make everyone else believe. They have that aura that allows everyone else to really convince themselves that, yeah, this is a great idea. We should put 3 people up long right now. Right now, let's just push it. Let's go for it as a team, as a unit. And I think Blitz inspires that in his players the way only a few really good IGLs can right now. They've also been very committed to developing young players. Early on, we saw them have some success with more established, famous names within the Mongolian scene, but slowly replaced them with very young, impressionable, and moldable players. We all saw this as a big risk. Those of us who followed the Asian scene, because not everyone was initially. When they were cutting players like Score, like Annihilation, not necessarily on the Mongols org, they were D13 at a time. It did seem like a bit of a risk to take some very unknown elements and just plug them in here. Guys who weren't known to be stars already. Guys like Mazinho, Senzu, even 910 seemed like huge gambles. But it's a combination of things that allowed them to really commit to this. Firstly, is they saw these players as better pieces than we really understood. They realized that these guys actually had a lot of untapped potential that could be used to great effect. But they also took the process of integrating these players into the team, getting them to understand the system, and then unleashing them very gradually and procedurally. When these players first arrived into the roster, they had the most basic roles. They didn't take that many critical fights. You'd see Blitz was very often leading the way in these big opening brawls. He was expected to open rounds, then in the mid round call the great round, and then in the late round clutch it out. It was very heavily dependent on Blitz. Sure, the players were still sharp, but the actual game plan revolved very heavily around Blitz. As the players grew more comfortable, understood their roles, responsibilities, how Tier 1 CS is meant to be played, they started taking more and more of that initiative and became in themselves more assertive. When we look at the run over the last 3 months, there's been a bit of a shift. Blitz is more clutch focused, he's more alert in the late round, but in the early rounds he's really pushing his young fraggers forward. Mazinho's taking more openings, Techno's taking more openings, more entry work, and these guys are able to open things up. Senzu, not to be forgotten, has become an amazing playmaker. Now, he was one of the least sort of pigeonholed players when he initially joined. He was allowed to take the second AWP, be a little more of a flair risk player, but the fact that he has understood his role in the system a lot better over time, been given the right to even more freedom as he's understood his position, has been key. They have an X factor in Senzu that a lot of teams probably don't. He is unbelievable. 910 was obviously a bit of an odd one. We saw some flashes very early and thought, oh, maybe they have got something here. But we really struggled to see that consistency, and the team, obviously the results went with it. But in this run, he has been outstanding. Not necessarily a world beater on the level of like a Munacy or a Zaiwu, but certainly an AWPer they can rely on to find his frags throughout the map. But this run at the Major is obviously what has caught all our attention. We already knew a certain amount about these players and the styles they want to play. How did they go on this run to just all of a sudden be in the playoffs of Major, the first from Asia to ever do it? Did they just get lucky? Well, we have to examine the past games they've played. They pretty much haven't lost since losing to Ents at... I don't even remember the name of the event. I'm doing all of this off the top of the dome, hence the unscripted part of the title. Which event was it they lost Ents in? It was at Masters in Espoo. Okay. So since losing that Espoo game, they haven't lost. And sure, the majority of the run was built up off tier 1.5 kind of teams. They won Thunderpick, they beat Heroic, who are a top 10 team, and I think legitimately so. But it didn't seem that convincing. They didn't face like the top 6. Well, here at the Major, the elimination stage, they did actually manage to pull off those wins. They were able to again beat Heroic in a BO3, they beat G2 in a best of 1, and they beat Mongolz. That's pretty incredible. So clearly, there is a method to their madness, and it is getting more and more effective. We've seen them slowly climb up, we've seen them have the occasional upset win, we know they're capable of that ceiling. It's just a question of how consistent they could be. Here we see they're starting to really figure it out, how to maintain a level closer to that ceiling we'd seen earlier, when they had gotten upset wins like that 2-0 over Spirit. Things we didn't think were necessarily that replicable, that they needed more time. Well, they've had a little bit more time, not as much time as we thought they needed, and they've made it pretty much close to it. I want to consider now, sort of into the future, into the rest of this event even, how reliable is this level from the Mongols? I really like the way they are composed. I think they are composed in a way that is very forward thinking. They may not have realized it when they made these decisions, made these adjustments, but this is a team of the future. Firstly, they have a fragging IGL, who is more leader than straight tactician, although he clearly has a great mind for the mid round. He is a fragger and just a pure leader first and foremost. We already see a couple top teams going towards this. Suhei on Mongolz and Kixan on Heroic. Both players who are able to lead their teams but also frag a little bit, who have that sort of leadership aura rather than just pure tactical brains. It is really important, and I think it's the way most teams should try to go in the future. I'm not saying there's no value in the pure strategist IGLs who just give up a lot of things, but I think it is going to be more effective if you can rely on every single player on your team to hold their own in a gunfight, especially when there are so few full gun rounds available in a best of 1 or just MR12 in general. The other part of this is that they have anchor lurkers, historically role players who are far more competent and far more confident in making plays. See, a guy like a Mazinho, a Techno, is usually in the past going to be, very hard entry, sort of sacrificial, or he's going to be hard anchoring on the defensive side and not really able to do much. But these are players who are incredibly sharp and who are able to frag out despite the positions they're typically in. Now, we have said that, Techno and Mazinho have been pushed forward a little bit. There are certain maps, certain areas where they're actually able to activate. I think one of my favorite ones is when Mazinho tries to fight towards short on Inferno A site. He really is sharp, loves those angles, loves those fights, has great timing with the flashbangs. But even on the defensive end, where these guys are supposed to be more anchoring, there's always that freedom to call for a play, try to make something happen, and really lock down their bomb sites in more ways than just sitting and waiting. Part of what enables this playstyle is the fact that all 4 riflers on this team are in the top 30 for explosive fragging, the metric that I was developing with EDR. I wasn't really sure who exactly on this roster would top it out, because I was thinking, I've watched these guys play, I've seen their POVs, they're all very sharp. Well, guess what? All of them end up in the top 30, and I think Senzu and Techno, I'm just checked the spreadsheet, are in the top 10. Like, these are legit fraggers. They aren't just getting kills on players who are looking the wrong way. It's not purely the system enabling this. It's not going to fade if the players have a bit of an off day in terms of understanding exactly how to read everything. It's not all cerebral what's going down this roster. They have firepower like almost no other team who's trying to project themselves into this sort of space. I mean, teams who were a bit scrappy at this major, guys like Wildcard who managed to upset their way through, they don't have 4 explosive riflers. They have 3 on a good day, and that's on a good day. Mongols, even on an off day, know they have sharp individuals they can rely on and fall back on. So they have a multitude of different paths to success, and that's becoming, well, more and more dangerous for people trying to defeat them. Now for me, I see Mongolz as a team of the future in multiple ways. I said it in terms of their composition, but also just they are so young and they have so much left to show us. I think we should be very afraid going into 2025. Hell, this major isn't even over, and they've got into the playoffs already 3-0. They might be ready to shock the world now. Now, personally, I don't think that's going to be the case. I still think that their style of play needs a little refinement. They could execute things a little smoother in terms of the way they take map control. Sometimes it can feel a little boom or bust. Some of the plays they go for, very all in, and when it works, it's brilliant, but when it doesn't, it looks a little bit silly. They just get mowed down. So I do think there's still some things to refine about the Mongols, but considering where they started from with this incredibly blitz-dependent, simplistic game plan, not make things too complicated for the rest of the team, and have evolved since then into a team with more and more individuals who are able to think, contribute, playmake, I have no reason to believe they won't continue to evolve and eventually reach the pinnacle. This may be an event too soon, but Mongols are bloody dangerous. Alright, if you enjoyed, please leave a like, leave a comment to me your thoughts on the Mongols, especially their run at this major, and what they could be in the future. Sub if you want to see more content, and remember that members get access to bonus content, including an interview with Regin of TSM that just dropped. And yeah, that's all for this one. Goodbye.